What's up, average engineers? Today I want to talk about a sort of funny subject. As some of you may or may not know, I've been producing content for many years, 6-7 years I've been blogging. I have a pretty decently well-known blog, Confessions of a Data Guy. Probably gets 8,000 visits a week or so. It's kind of funny. Over the years I've learned what content does well and what doesn't. You could say I know how to trigger people. Like any news organization, it's not the rainbows and unicorns that gets the clicks. It's the stuff that makes people mad that gets the clicks, and I definitely do that myself to drive traffic, because I know it'll make people angry at this point in my life. Been doing data engineering for over a decade, so I know it makes people mad. There's some unpopular opinions that I have that take a lot of flack for, but I'm totally happy to do that. One of those topics is SQL, and people love SQL, especially data engineers. They love SQL. Too much, in my opinion, from what I've seen over my decade of working in and around data teams. I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of data engineers come from maybe non-computer science backgrounds, right? They come from all different walks of life and self-taught and things like that. And SQL, of course, drives the data world. It's a huge part of that. That's how I got into data engineering. I've worked in data warehousing teams and worked on SQL for a long time, and I enjoy it. It's a great tool. It's the best. So I love SQL. It's got its place. It solves most of our problems, but not all of them. And I've got a take that too much SQL is a bad thing. So I recently wrote an article called SparkSQL is Destroying Your Pipelines. Mostly because, Spark is popular. Things like Databricks have made the notebook super easy to use, and everyone uses SparkSQL now. I use it, and in production I use it quite a bit. Amazing features. It's very easy to process large data sets in SQL, which has not been maybe as easy in the past, but there's a lot of downsides to it. And just to prove to you how much people hate this take, you can look at this. I posted it on Reddit knowing that I would get destroyed, and I did. 0 upvotes, or I got 0, upvotes. Upvote rate is 28%, 23,000 views. Jeez. 32 shares. I knew that was going to happen. 23 comments, and we should read some of them together. They just totally destroyed me. But first, let's kind of look at the article. My thing with SQL is that people don't use it correctly. They rely on it too much. It's all they know, and it gets dirty real fast. The reality is a lot of data engineering teams suck at testing, at doing repeatable logic. They just write nasty SQL statements. What can I say? It's been like that for years. Anyone who says otherwise is lying. 80-20 rule. 80% of the people that use Spark all over the pipelines are just writing nasty, huge, old SQL statements that are just got business logic buried in them, subqueries that get added onto over time. They're reduplicated over and over again and spread out. And yes, that has a lot to do with the team that's working on it, but let's be honest, it has something to do with the tool as well. I mean, if this wasn't the case, DBT wouldn't exist, right? All the SQL people are worshiping at the altar of DBT, which of course they would, because it helps with that problem that I just described. But people like to pretend that's not a reality when it is. But basically my take was thousands of lines of untamable SQL, subqueries upon subqueries, nested case statements, SQL files flung far and wide, no real reason, business logic repeated hundreds of times over. It's just a problem. Most people that are using SQL have no test. Logic is reproduced and spread everywhere. Business logic is scattered and inconsistent, overly complicated queries, and there's no rhyme or reason, and most of it's not code that is reproducible. It's, this query does this one thing, and you end up with 50,000 of them. And it all starts out fine. I mean, I worked on many data warehousing teams, worked with SQL my whole life, a lot, and I still do today. But but it's got a dark side, and a lot of people are too stuck on it and they don't use it correctly, and it, creates a lot of problems. I mean, if you look at this, example, which is just a fake example of like a pretty typical thing, some CTE with a subquery with some case statements, a bunch of hard-coded values, and this is probably actually a fairly simple example of what you would see in production, and this 55 times over, right? Versus what I argue for is, use SQL where you have to. If there's a merge statement, some just simple analytics you need to run, sure, SQL, it's great. Do certain things with it. It works great for merge statements, insert statements, things like that. But what would you rather have in a long term? I would rather have code that looks like this. If you're using Spark, use a data frame API, make testable and reusable functions. And that's one of the things that I got ripped apart on Reddit, was people saying you're pretty much a moron, which is fine. They're saying, well, SQL can be reusable. Well, that's true, but again, I would argue that tools like dbt became so popular now is because that's not true. People don't use SQL like that. People make SQL suck, and they use it too much, and they just write huge, massive queries that get overly complicated, that reproduce business logic over and over and over again, and it just turns into a nightmare. So I still like sticking with my guns, saying, you're using it too much. You're using SQL too much. You need to not use it so much. Use it when you should use it, not for everything. I mean, look at this Reddit comment about my article, 64 upvotes. Whew. This is so silly. You can write modular SQL in PySpark, and it's often more readable than the PySpark API. Yeah, maybe it's more readable. Usually not, because the SQL statements get massive and hard to read too. And no, if you're writing little functions of reusable PySpark data frame API stuff, no, it's way easier to read that. And he says he's a programmer with 20 years of Python experience, about 6 years of SQL. I kind of doubt it. SQL is more succinct. I mean, yeah, I don't get it, man. It's just anyone who's done data engineering for any amount of time knows the downsides of having pure SQL pipelines. Of course, for tabular data, SQL is king. It doesn't make any sense. It's a data frame. APIs can be used for the same thing, and your code will be way more reliable. It'll be tested. And, a lot of people argue that, hey, you can test SQL, and yeah, but people don't. They don't write little 1-3 line SQL statements that are like parameterized and then keep that function somewhere and pull it out and use it. That's not how they do it. That's not the reality. They write crappy pipelines that are just horrible to take care of after a while and are sucky. Some people say the problem isn't SQL, it's the legacy databases. It's, that's a good take. If you ask me, the problem was never SQL. It's a little bit SQL, at least. Give me a break. Yeah, talking about people fixing the SQL, yeah. Somebody wants my article to be removed, 51 upvotes. This guy saved my butt. I guess there's a couple people. Buffer Underpants said it's not so bad. It's not so bad. Medium article. It's a plea not to write untested beep code with no modularity. He says I'm blaming SparkSQL is unfair. Well, if I did this fair, no one would be reading the article. So, joke's on you. Yeah, I just think it's an interesting topic, and I wrote another one out to go find it about you're using SQL too much, and again, people just go crazy about that stuff because they love their SQL, and I get it and I don't get it. That's why data engineering can have bad names a lot of times, because people like it too much and they use it too much and they don't use it correctly. And again, you said it's an engineer. That doesn't matter. If everyone's doing it, then you need to find different ways to do things, right? I got a little bit better received on LinkedIn. About 11,000 impressions, 109 likes, 18 comments. Yeah, people are a little bit nicer, probably. Yeah. It's just funny that people love their SQL so much and they just refuse to come into the new world of unit-tested modular code. The problem is all the SQL lovers that's all they know. And I've worked with a lot of people like that too, that just just a one-trick pony, man. It's SQL or bust, and then it just over time on the teams that are filled with people like that, it turns into a nightmare. So I'm sticking by it, man. SparkSQL will destroy your pipelines if you use it too much.